To be understood as a full human being in our times, to be understood as a person who is capable of moral decision-making, this law would suggest we must go back to a time when women weren't fully seen, understood, even experienced as morally equivalent creatures to men. You can see that in the ways that we gave such powerful responsibilities to the men in our lives. We have given them the ability to decide to take us into war. Terrible wars. Wars we are still burying people from, who made courageous and heroic decisions, knowing thousands and thousands and thousands of people would die. But we said to those good men in time when they had all of the power to decide, we trust your moral authority, we know it's complicated, we know you're making decisions based on factors where you're trying to hold a larger good. And during this history, women were making the case because we were not deemed full human beings. We really weren't. We couldn't vote, we couldn't own property for years, we couldn't make decisions on our own, we couldn't, there were so many things we couldn't do until we had a man's blessing. Well, we fought for those freedoms, and we fought for the right to be seen as fuller human beings. But in this debate, we come up against the undertone that says, dear beloved woman, you don't have the moral authority. You don't have the abilities to really decide this on your own, much less how we know women do make decisions. They make them in relationship. To understand the moral quality of women's thinking and the way we shape our decisions, you have to understand that everything we do is relational. So when a woman finds herself, and today I'm just going for what this bill doesn't cover, is not protected, forced impregnation. So if you happen to be a woman who didn't consciously decide to choose to have the encounter that gets you pregnant, which means a man is involved, let's just say you didn't choose that, and it's forced upon you. And you find yourself pregnant. We go back to a time when you're a young woman, forced impregnation, money is scarce, one clinic in the state, you are terrified and alone. And you may not figure out all of what you have to do, even if it means you have to bear the child that has now been implanted, that is a real being for the future. You have to decide if your life will become a path you never thought was going to happen to you. You have to decide if you will be the only one to bear that responsibility. And that's why so many young women, when we were in these times, would find themselves so alone, would take their own lives, kill themselves, because it was too overwhelming, too frightening. And no one said, you actually have the moral capabilities. We are here for you, and we recognize that you have been forced into impregnation, and this was not a decision you made, and that you do have the moral fiber to honor the law that holds that we as a society are ambivalent about this moral dilemma, but that most women, when given a moral opportunity to decide, move quickly if they have been forced, especially raped, in any way harmed around this occurrence of impregnation forced upon them. They move to make it right for their life too, for their deepest dreams. And yes, abortion can be a part of that decision making. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes they say, I want to birth this child, and give it up for adoption. Sometimes they say, I want to have this child. This may be the only chance I ever have for a child. That is what I have seen women go through. And here's the piece I need you to understand. I recognize that it is scary to fully embrace women's moral authority. It is scary because we really don't yet understand what it means to let women lead us. Lead, truly. I don't think we would be as far apart from one another, though, if we held genuinely our deepest knowing as women to join with men, because, dear brethren, you are so responsible for what we are facing. And to walk away like you do, time and again, when we really are alone, and to act as if you didn't have a hand in it, and to speak of abortion as if it floats up in the air with no place in your life other than it being a death sentence. And it is not the truth, because if we're in it together, we find a way, just as we have in every moral dilemma of our time, to save each other's common souls. We can do this. We can find a better way. And you must let women fully into the moral fiber of this nation if we're ever going to get over it, and find a way to love one another back into wholeness. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.